Hi there. So I grew up in southeastern Tasmania, and if you allow me a few moments of nostalgia, I'll show you where I came from in order that you better understand where we end up. For a few of our early years, we lived in a tent at the end of a lush valley by a river. Later, my brother and I built our own tent. We milked our own cows, worked the land, and grew vegetables and fruit that we lived off. We felled our own trees, and we milled our own timber to build the house I grew up in. We lived a self-sufficient lifestyle, and what I thought sustainable at that time. Many years later in London, when I was teaching, the head of my department gave a lecture, and she used this book, The Rabbits, to illustrate her talk. And I'm going to read a few pages from this book to you now. It's a story of colonization in Australia, where the colonized are depicted by the native animals, and the rabbits are depicted, the colonizers are depicted by rabbits, an invasive and damaging species which is responsible for much of the natural devastation in Australia. So from the book, at first we didn't know what to think. They looked a bit like us. There weren't many of them. Some were friendly. They didn't live in the trees like we did. They made their own houses. We couldn't understand the way they talked. They ate our grass. They chopped down our trees and scared away our friends. And the story goes on. Rabbits, rabbits, rabbits. Millions and millions of rabbits. Everywhere we look, there are rabbits. And the book ends, who will save us from the rabbits? So as I was listening to a lecture, I began to think that I was probably a rabbit, and my brother was a rabbit too. And I realized I didn't want to be a rabbit anymore. So I thought it might be better to be like a chameleon, able to adapt and change and blend with our environment rather than conquer it. As designers, we're able to practice globally in our networked world. We move from village to city to country to continent with ease. And we practice using a common global language. But if we were chameleon designers, we would adapt that language to each new environment that we practiced in. This is a scheme we're currently working on in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, a series of small pavilions placed around the existing trees on a small site. The steep roofs with air vents to catch the sea breezes, allow heat to escape and shed monsoonal rains. Much of Dar es Salaam is built on ancient coral reefs, and these coral reefs are mined to create aggregates and lime. And we're discussing using some of these coral for the walls of this building. About 500 meters away from this site is this coral mine, and most of the aggregates here are crushed manually, and they're used to make limestone and aggregates for building materials. To the north of Dar es Salaam, there's a cement factory off in the distance, and some of these aggregates are taken to this cement factory, and here they're used to make high-quality Portland cement, mainly for export. It's rumoured that Roald Dahl once sat underneath a tree on the right and gazed across at this cement factory, as I did when I took this photograph. And it was this cement factory that was the inspiration for Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, an icon of decadence and excess. Sadly, this is a new build house in Dar es Salaam today. It's built using mainly imported low-quality cement, imported roof tiles and other imported building materials. It has virtually no relationship to the site on which it is. And there's nothing that tells us that this house is in Dar es Salaam. We believe we can do better than this. Our studio has been working predominantly in East Africa for the past 3 years, and we've been fortunate enough to have clients that encourage us to respect local traditions, values, and to create an experience born of the place. We use nature as an inspiration for our work. This roof on the right here was inspired by this amazing cloud formation I saw one morning, created by the morning sun heating the mist that falls in the valley overnight. Our roof structure has a spiraling structure that leads up towards a skylight, and the skylight brings light down into the center of a covered outdoor terrace. Working in harmony with nature, this bougainvillea on the left has been trained onto a simple timber structure in order to create a shaded place to sit and work or pass the time throughout the day. Our building on the right uses this as its model, so we created a thick, shaded, insulated roof, timber pole, and it allows the space to be used freely below and light and air to pass between. the wall and the roof. Or a simple eave shade structure that we simply grew a passion fruit vine over so that people enjoying their breakfast in the morning can pick fresh passion fruit as they eat their fruit salad. And we also use man-made objects as a inspiration for our work. This is a house in a slum in Kampala, Uganda's capital city, and it's constructed using old unfolded oil tanks and fuel tanks and car bonnets. And it's this type of work which is an inspiration to us for its because it's born of necessity. The building on the right is a small entrance pavilion that we're building, and it's cladded using recycled materials. This small workers' hut on the edge of a cotton plantation next to our site is a perfect template for us when we were building some accommodation units. The thick insulated roof protects from the equatorial sun. It's oriented to protect from the seasonal rains. There's a shaded open space to look out across the cotton plantation for security. Our building attempts to do the same. A thick insulated roof, covered outdoor spaces, a closed side to the rear protecting from seasonal rains, and openings towards the magical views beyond. We use two types of timber in the construction of our projects there. In the top left-hand corner, you'll see eucalyptus, an invasive Australian species, somewhat like myself. And in the top right-hand corner, you'll see an East African satinwood, both timbers available locally. So we use these timbers for all parts of the building, for the structure, for the framing, for the joinery, and so on. We didn't waste any parts of the trees. The branches left over from the East African satinwood were used to create the handrails on the decks of this building, whereas the offcuts from the timber, the eucalyptus poles that were created for framing, were sliced into smaller pieces and used to line the underside of this ceiling onto the veranda. And the pathway on the left, typical in villages and slums throughout Uganda to protect from the mud in the rainy season, was the inspiration. Our projects were far away from cities. They were mainly out in national parks, and transport was sometimes unreliable, as basic services such as water and power. So we tried to do everything manually. Here you can see some of the tools we had to work with. There's an old car seat belt which is used as a tool belt, a rake made out of old timbers and rusty nails, and a hacksaw handle made out of a piece of bent metal rod. And the materials we sourced locally as well. Everything we found there, such as thatch, recycled metal, and locally fired clay bricks, all of them unique, no materials the same, with their own texture and colour and quality. And most importantly, the people that we worked with. So we sourced all of our labour from the areas surrounding, and we tailored and adapted our design techniques and construction techniques to the skills that we found. So we found masons and carpenters and weavers, and we worked with them to understand what they could do so that our designs could reflect that. And we also taught new skills so that the knowledge transfer process was two-way. We were learning as much as we were teaching. We also used local community groups to undertake tasks for us. On the left is a weaver bird's nest. The site is on the edge of a national park in Uganda, which has the highest number of bird species in Africa. And we asked a local women's group to make 200 versions of this nest for us. We then created a lighting installation out of the nest. You can see the original weaver bird nest tree on the left, our nest hanging in the middle, and at night the installation set up twinkling with the stars. So we had a magical landscape to work with, and we didn't want to intrude on it, and it would have actually been better to do absolutely nothing at all. So what we decided to do was try and blend our buildings in with the landscape. Here we physically traced the lines of the horizon, used them to slice through our building, and then we built each layer of the building with one of these bricks, local bricks that we found. So we developed a sort of a strata through the building, and we carried this onto the inside of the building, trying to blur the distinction between inside and outside. This is one of my favourite juxtapositions in Uganda. It's an ancient volcano which has been draped with a tapestry, a patchwork quilt of fertile farmland, each patch with its own different texture and colour. And in the foreground you'll see the shining corrugated iron roofs, a symbol of progress and one of the most commonly found building materials. Around our projects, we realised there was a lot of houses and schools and buildings which had old corrugated iron roofs that had passed their use-by date. They were leaking, they weren't doing their job anymore, and people couldn't afford to replace them. So we worked with a local charity to set up a program which we called the Rusty Roof Exchange, where we built new roofs for those in need, and we took their old metal roofs. And the locals thought we were mad. But we wanted to take this product and see if we could give it a new life, to upcycle it. So we cut it into thin strips, and we use it to weave lampshades. We cut it into smaller pieces and used it to clad parts of our buildings. And we actually draped it across the roofs of our buildings to create our own patchwork tapestry. I'm sorry it's a bit dark, this image, but effectively there's a patchwork quilt of corrugated iron laid over the top of these buildings, which creates an air gap between the layer below and also protects the waterproofing membrane below, so it gives it a longer life. We wanted our buildings to disappear into the landscape as they are in this image, rather than contrast it. And our roofs took on new lives. They changed colour and texture and pattern throughout the day. They were constantly evolving. So to end, we believe that to create architecture that is born of the place, in both developing and developed worlds, that we need to source materials locally, we need to use construction methods that are available locally wherever possible, to recycle, to upcycle, and to be resourceful, and most importantly, be present in order to discover beauty in unexpected places. Thank you very much.